Hello happy crocheters, this is Lindsay from windingroadcrochet.com and today I'm going to show you how to embroider on a piece of crochet. If you like this tutorial, make sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. For this project we are going to need a handful of things, but these are things you should hopefully have on hand with the exception of probably the embroidery hoop. For this project, I am just using Red Heart Super Saver worsted weight yarn. I have white for the background. I am using the purple ombre for the different colors for the lavender and some green. I'm also going to be using a fine point felt pin. You don't have to do this part, but I do find it is useful if you have one hanging around. We are also going to need a yarn needle. For this project, I am using just a standard blunt end yarn needle and it did work just fine. They do make large embroidery needles. I think they're size 14 through 18 is what I have here. These would work if you want to pick them up, if you enjoy what we're about to do, that's fine, but you can use a standard yarn needle. That is just fine too. Then you are going to need a 6-inch embroidery hoop, though you can use different sizes, and I'll kind of quickly talk you through how we make the base for this project. And last, you'll need a pair of scissors and possibly a piece of paper. So this is an example I have already made up. I made this one look like a little bundle of lavender using the multicolors of the purple. To start this project, you will need to crochet the base of our piece, and this is just a standard single crochet in continuous rounds circle. I used the worsted weight yarn. I used a 3.5 millimeter or size E crochet hook, and I worked a total of 13 rows. But you can work this as big or little as you want. What you were looking for is to be about 1 inch to a 1/2 inch smaller in diameter than your embroidery hoop, because we want to stretch this to make it fit our embroidery hoop and look really nice. So let me go ahead and show you how to stretch our centerpiece. But before we stretch it, if you want, you can take your middle embroidery hoop and draw a circle and take this time to just lightly sketch out what you want your design to look like. This is going to help us later, but this step is completely optional. To prep our embroidery hoop, I'm going to cut out 4 around 3-inch strands of yarn. I'm using the dark purple just so that you can see what I'm doing a little bit better. And I'm also going to use my embroidery hook, though you could also use the yarn needle, both work. And I'm going to use these 4 strands of yarn to basically tack our piece in place. So I'm going to push through any stitch and pull through the yarn, and then wrap it around our embroidery hoop and knot it. And when you knot the sides, you want to knot it as tight as you can. We're kind of beginning to stretch it in place, but we will be sewing stitches to actually secure everything in place. So now I'm going to do this on all 4 sides of my piece to secure it before sewing. So here I'm going to take a very long yarn end that I left when I made my original backing piece, and I am going to thread it through a needle, and we're just going to whip stitch into every other stitch in order to attach this to the hoop. So going around the hoop and from the back to the front, I'm just going to skip 1 stitch, go into the next stitch, and I am going to pull this as tight as I can, and I'm going to use my fingers, my thumb or my forefinger and my thumb to pinch this and keep this strand of yarn as tight as I can as I work around this project. So I'm just going to twist this way and then use my thumb to press down on that strand of yarn to keep it nice and tight as I make my next stitch. Again, I'm skipping a stitch. You don't have to. You can definitely whip stitch into every single stitch. That's totally fine. I just found it worked just fine going with every other stitch. But as you can see, I'm using my thumb to keep the tension on the yarn that we are sewing with. As I continue working around the project, it got a little hard to use my thumb pressing on the top, so instead I'm going to use my forefinger and my thumb, and I'm just going to be pinching that yarn, keeping it as tight as I can, and just as I pull the next stitch tight, I just grab the new yarn with my forefinger and my thumb, and I will continue this all the way around the project until it is nice and secured to the hoop. When I make it all the way around the hoop, I'm just going to use my yarn to make a stitch and then make a knot. So I'm just going to stitch under one of these strands of yarn here. I'm going to take the loop I'm holding on to and twist it and put my yarn needle through that loop that I've created. Then very, very carefully, you're going to pull it so that the knot is on the back side of our work. And then you can weave in your ends. And this is ready for us to embroider. So before we grab our yarn and our needle, we are just going to take our felt tip pin and very carefully draw onto our crocheted piece. That's why I recommend using the paper first to make sure you practice this, because once you put those lines on, you're not going to be able to get them off. So you want to make sure you are drawing it on the way you like. I am just going to draw the stem of the plants using the template that I've already drawn out. I'm just going to freelance the leaves and the lavender buds when we get to stitching, but I just want to be able to lightly draw in the stems of the plants. So using a really fine point pen and just very, very carefully, I am going to draw in the stems. And I'm just going to speed up the video so I didn't actually draw it this fast, but just so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just going to draw in 5 stems for our lavender. Now that everything is drawn, it's time for us to go ahead and work our stitches. I'm taking a piece of yarn that's between 3 to 5 feet long, so this is excellent to use up scrap yarn. And I'm going to make a double knot on one end of it. There we go. And we are going to use something called the stem stitch for the stems of our plants. So finding the bottom of my line, I'm just going to bring my yarn from the back of my work out to the front of my work. I'm trying to do this as close as I can to the hoop. Pull the yarn all the way through, and then you are going to make a stitch that is approximately 1/4 of an inch long. I'm actually moving up 2 rows. Sometimes I'll work in between the stitches. Sometimes I'm going to work through the center of the stitches. It's just wherever you need to put your needle so that you have the size stitch you're looking for. We're going to pull until we have about a 1-inch loop left. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bring our yarn needle up between the 2 stitches we've made. So in the middle of that stitch. And then we're going to pull tight. So now above the top of the green, going up about 1 row, I'm going to make another stitch. And I'm going to pull the yarn until I have about a 1-inch loop again. And then I'm going to bring my yarn needle back up in the middle of the stitch that we are making. I always want to make sure my yarn loop is always on the one side. So right now for me, it's on the right side of my work. And this is how you make your stem stitch. So again, I'm going to move up about 1 row. Insert my needle, pull until I have a 1-inch loop left, and then go in between that loop. So in between the 2 spots that that loop is attaching. And what you're going to get is a stitch that looks twisted. It's going to be a little bit thicker stitch and it's going to look twisted, and it works beautifully for crocheting stems. Sorry, for embroidering stems. You can tell that I normally do crochet videos. So I'm just going to continue stitching the stem stitch until we reach the very top of this line that we've created, and I'm just following the line, which is a little bit of an S shape. So I'm just following the line and making sure all my stitches are made on the line until we reach the very top. When we are about a 1/4 inch from the top, you're just going to go to the top of your line and push your needle down and to the back of your work. So one more stitch, and then I'm going to find the very top of my line and just put my needle right at the top of that line and bring the yarn to the back of our work. I'm going to go ahead and fasten off after every stem, but you can just jump over to the next stem if you like. To fasten off, you are going to weave your yarn end back and forth under a few stitches. Ideally, you want to go back and forth through about 3 stitches, and then you can clip your yarn, make a new knot, and continue making the other 4 stem pieces, or however many stem pieces you have for your design. Here I have finished all 5 stems, and now I'm getting the purple yarn. I've already knotted the end, and we are going to begin doing something called the lazy daisy stitch. I love this stitch because it makes a loop, and it's just so easy to use and be used for so many things. So starting at the very top of one of our stems, I'm going to pull my yarn all the way through, and then I'm going to insert my needle back down the same hole that we pulled out of. And I am going to pull the yarn until I have about a 1-inch loop. Now I want to find where the top of my petal is going to be, and I'm going to push my needle through there. I'm going to take my loop and make sure I loop it over my needle so that the needle is coming through the loop. Gently pull your yarn through your work until that loop will slowly tighten. You want to tighten it down until it's the size you want it to be, and then you're going to insert your needle back into the hole that it came up from. And in this way, we are going to tack the top of that loop in place, and that will be our lavender bud. There you go. From here, you just want to continue making these lazy daisy loops, working either in a V shape on each side of the bud or having them horizontal to the edge of the stem. It's completely up to you how you want to do it. You can look at my finished work and see which you prefer. But my best advice is just to really play with it. You can really see what the stitch is going to look like before you tack it in place. So really play with it and try different things. Be experimental, because I really do think having a variety is what's going to make it look most natural. You also have the option of changing colors. So this one I'm going to do all the medium purple that I have on hand, but you could start the top with the light purple and then do the last set of lavender buds in dark purple if you like. It's just completely up to you. This is basically your piece of artwork, so get creative and do what you want to be done to it. So here is what it looked like when I was finished. You can see in some places I spread out the lavender buds. Sometimes I stacked them right on top of each other. It's just completely up to you. Now the very last thing we need to add is just a few leaves, both some long leaves and some short leaves. To do this, just decide where you want the bottom of your leaf to be and bring your yarn up right next to the stem. And then make a single straight stitch to the top of the leaf. For this leaf, I want to make it a little thicker, so I'm going to go to the side and a little down from where we made the first stitch and make a smaller stitch going into the same hole at the bottom of our leaf, either the same hole or right next to it, just to give it a little bit of a triangle shape. Now I'm going to make another leaf, again coming up next to the stem, making a long straight stitch, and then making a smaller stitch right next to it just to thicken up that leaf a little bit. We're going to take this one down into the stem a little better because that first stitch didn't really touch the stem. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a few really tiny leaves just using a single straight stitch. I'm going to do these up closer to the lavender buds. And just keep doing this to all of your stems. The leaves are going to give it a very natural look. And then once you complete all your leaves for all 5 stems, your lavender crochet and embroidery project will be done. What might be really cute is if you're feeling ambitious, you can embroider the words lavender on the top of the project. That would definitely be very cute. So I really hope you enjoyed this video tutorial. I tried to aim this to be something you can play with without having to get anything really special. All you would really need is an embroidery hoop. Everything else you should have on hand. If you want to see more tutorials like this, I do have a few ideas for like sunflowers and daisies and maybe tulips that I could do. So just let me know in the comments below. And so thank you so much for watching, and I hope you check out the next video.